I have to say, I really like the artwork for this one, Sharon. The Harry Potter theme. For folks that notice, like Sharon, I guess I should move my mic over here too. Sharon puts together all of the background images in the collection, and I select from them. But I really like that Harry Potter-esque castle look.
You can see I use AI for that, and it's been a fun thing to do. And you can see like how much better it's getting. It's progressively like getting more detailed and more organized, and spelling. It's learned how to spell for the most part.
I don't think you should have given that up. I think that it was a handmade watercolor that Sharon spends her weekends doing those. But good morning. Hello.
Good morning. Welcome to the Project Failure Files. This. Now you got me thinking about all the prints.
I know, yeah.
This series is for anyone who manages projects, project teams for a living, or has to handle them. Maybe it's not for a living. Maybe you don't even get paid for it, but you have to manage things and figure out how to do it. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And it's what we do. And I'm Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk. And welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I explore project management and leadership development and organizational management, kind of all those different things from the perspective of what not to do as you manage projects. In each episode, we talk about the common pitfalls, share some personal stories, and we've got some doozies for this one, and experiences, and explore strategies and best practices to help you to be successful.
So in this episode, we are talking about clearly defining roles and responsibilities, or more to the point of this series, what happens when you don't define them. So we're going to call this episode When Everyone's in Charge.
When everyone's in charge, no one's in charge. And this is one of those bread and butter topics for project owners. And yet I see this failure time and time again. I know we've talked about this. We've got some good stories here.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things that can really set the tempo for an execution of a project, definitely derail it before it even gets started, especially if you're dealing with stakeholders with very strong personalities. And I would say also like senior level team members who have a ton of experience and a ton of knowledge.
People with maybe strong skill sets and strong personalities that they see it not going the way that the last project they were working on went. And so they do a little bit extra. Mm-hmm. But I like this phrasing. It makes me think of the Far Side of that, the animal walking through the forest on a path with a vacuum cleaner. It says, nature does abhor a vacuum. And when there is you remember that one, and when there is a lack of definition and ownership around a project, nature tends to close in.
Yeah, definitely a bit of natural selection in the office. I can definitely see that. And yeah, there are a lot of predators out there.
People that want to help, Sharon, not predators.
Yeah.
Should be a great conversation, I'm sure. And as with every episode, please feel free to comment throughout the episode and share your experiences and any great examples or feedback that we may have missed.
All right, let's get started. Let's talk about definitions and, why clarity around roles and responsibilities can be so incredibly important.
Yeah, this is one of those things like the fundamentals. It makes me think of one of my first thoughts of for many years, I think I told you this, Sharon, I was a Cub Master for several years. Had a lot of fun with that. Of course, Pinewood Derby is always the highlight. And we started a tradition of the dads get to go and do, or any other family members. There are some both parents and older siblings and younger siblings, other races there. Had a lot of fun there. But one of the things that we'd always do when we're preparing for something is sit and go through like the rules, the ground rules. And we'd have like the ongoing rules of, hey, we're all together. We're here at a PAC meeting. This is what we do. We're in a church building, like be a little more reverent, don't run screaming through the hallways, those kinds of rules. And then there were the rules around the specific event. So, I mean, in this case, from like a project management, we had our methodology, we had the structure, but we also had the constraints of here's how in this company we do things. Here's the culture that kind of drives those things. When you have, and we're not talking about bureaucracy, we're not talking about just structure for the sake of having structure. But when you have those kind of baseline rules and that methodology, it guides everything that we do, how we do it. It means that there's consistency in some of those things. So having that up front really matters, because then you can drop in any project, any problem to go and solve, or you identify a new risk and you have the structure, who owns it to go and do.
Yeah, as opposed to what not to do, which is pretty much almost, I'm not going to say all, but many software development companies that I've worked for in the past. If you guys have ever worked with me in any of those, you could probably remember this and probably agree with me. But you start day one and somebody you don't know that hasn't introduced themselves to you hands you a laptop, points you to a cube, and you never hear from anybody again. And you literally have no idea what you're doing except for, I guess I'll figure it out.
Yeah, that whole assumption that roles will kind of work themselves out, not really for a lot of those roles, because then what you do is you start stepping on other people's toes. Other people, will come in and say, well, this organization owns that task. We need to drive responsibility. I said, well, does that other team, are they aware of this new project? Do they know that they have that ownership? Have they said, yes, we accept that? Especially as a new employee, as a consultant, as a project manager coming in, you may not know some of those relationships. And so you can't make assumptions. You need to go and reconfirm, hey, these are the roles. These are the accountabilities. Here are the outputs that you signed on to. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire as we go forward. Yes, there's an acceptance. That's why there are certain processes in place when you're delivering a subpoena, whether you are, did they sign the contract? Why that police officer makes you sign the ticket that's not an admission of guilt, but signs that over so you acknowledge that you understand the process and your ability to go and fight that ticket, for example, so there's that accountability. Say, I never signed that. You never gave me that. You never read me my rights. You never asked me if we had the bandwidth to take on this task. I would have never agreed. I would have told you up front, we do not have the bandwidth for that. Give me people, give me time, give me money to be able to do that. Without those things, it's a no-go.
Yeah, and there's definitely a happy medium, and we'll talk a little bit about this as we go, but there's definitely a happy medium of the difference between the bureaucratic, every single person has one teeny tiny role and they are not allowed to do anything outside of that box. I mean, the more bureaucratic it gets, it's more that it works that way. You see this a lot in like government jobs and pseudo government jobs, utilities, things like that. It's like, I have my little box and that's it. I'm not allowed to do anything else. All the way to a small business like mine, where we're all wearing a lot of hats and doing a lot of things, and we're constantly tripping over each other, but we're always trying to define, like, hey, are you doing that or am I doing that? And it requires a ton of communication and forethought into like who's doing what, because there's a lot of work and not so many people. And I do believe at the end of the day that there's a really happy medium where everybody's in alignment. Everybody has an understanding of what they are supposed to be doing and who's doing what. But at the same time, there's an accountability, like you said, of communicating that so that everybody stays on the same page.
Yeah, one of the frustrating things too, especially when you have this amorphic definition, what are we actually doing? What is my level of ownership? Oh, by the way, sign up for the newsletter there. It's the brand new thing. Go to the site, sign up for that thing. But yeah, with all of that is again going back to this idea that people will just figure it out, and that never really happens. Is that it starts to impact people, start to realize that, hey, there's an impact where we're missing dates, announcements are not going out. It makes me think of, we were sharing this before we started recording, organizing events. Sharon and I have both organized a lot of tech events, management events, networking events, things like that. And when it's done as a community effort, or there's no clear owner of that activity, it's easier for people to say, well, somebody else is going to back me up. Somebody else is going to go and do that. And so it starts to impact overall productivity there. And what I've done in the past, right or wrong, like having organized dozens of what used to be called SharePoint Saturday, or, M365 community days, or whatever it is, collab days, is that at some point stuff is not getting done. And my tendency, and I know you're guilty of the same thing, is to pull in the reins, assign tasks. Some people absolutely love that. Just tell me what you need me to do, and I will go and do that thing. When you keep having to bring everything back to committee, like that's a problem too. Where you're waiting for the committee, the agreement, consensus on making a decision. That doesn't work either. So if you have it clearly outlined, like I might go out to the community and say, hey, look, in the next 3 days, we have to make a decision. Give me your feedback, your thoughts on this. We will be making that, or I will be making that decision based on those inputs. You give a clear, a time-specific window for that. People know, hey, I'm a stakeholder on this. I need to voice my. And I would always say, as a project manager, silence is agreement.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, at the same time, like, what not to do, right? Exactly that. Like, I think, if you don't participate, you don't communicate, you don't update things, you don't, provide your regular feedback, then I think the rest of the team just assumes like, okay, well, you're not participating, so therefore you're removing, your voice and your input into this. So if I make a decision, I'm just assuming that you're going to go along with it.
Yeah. And the other problems there too is, and that's true of some people. And we see a mixture of some people are just like, you've got it over there. And other people look at it, it's like, there's not really accountability. Somebody's going to do that. In other cases, it increases friction and tension because there's start to be blaming of well, this didn't go out, that email, that announcement, this was not done correctly. You've not talked with these other stakeholders. So you start to have these strained team relationships. It can also create decision-making bottlenecks. If I then take on all the responsibility, I'm just going to go push this through, I'm going to ram it through to get things done. It also means that more then falls on my shoulders, and I've got my real job. I'm doing stuff during the day. I become a bottleneck to all of the other activities because people are waiting for decisions to be made. And so my preference is always to set up stakeholders, set up the team. They know their roles and responsibilities, and they don't have to ask anybody within the confines. If they need to go outside of their area, they need to go talk to those owners or come back for clarification of that role.
Yeah, I also think it makes it easier too if for whatever reason somebody ends up not being able to fulfill a commitment. And when we think of this in, a day-to-day job setting, people get sick and people have things that happen in their lives. And, a perfect project plan has contingency, a perfect management plan has contingency. But a lot of times what we don't think about is, what happens if that person can't fulfill that obligation for some unknown reason. The more that this is clearly defined, the more that if somebody does need to come in and cover that gap, it's a lot quicker for somebody to be able to step in and be like, oh, I already know these are the 3 things that need to be done. I can step in quickly and I can help with that. And so, because what happens is if nobody knows, then nobody may know that you even missed anything because you didn't know that it was getting done in the first place.
Yeah, that's why it benefits. I mean, you have a formal system like the RACI model, RACI, which is responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. When you are, and I used to just think it's like these anal retentive PMs that are using that and going through in detail of all the stakeholders, like it's fantastic. I'm not getting in this section of the project. We'd actually go through very large implementations and we would have that for different phases because I might be somebody who's responsible for in phase 1. And then I'm just being informed on the later phases, but I participated. I want to know what's going on with that project. And some people I remember seeing stakeholders be like, dropped off. I used to get the invites to these meetings. Like, yeah, you agreed up front. Like, you're being informed, you're getting these emails. That's it. If you need to have more information, if that's the wrong level, let's update this and let's get you plugged into that. And so again, with a large implementation, it's sometimes easier to put that kind of framework in place so that you can have, email distribution lists set up for these kinds of notifications and who to invite meetings. It's everybody on that DL. When it's smaller, when it's a small group project, again, it just makes sense to, I still think, have documented, whether it's in the olden days, folks, we'd have these papers that would have things printed on them. with
Yep.
those details. But now you have it on the project site, maybe even have it in the
Or in a OneNote or
general tab in Teams or whatever you're using. Right up front, here's the PM, here are the stakeholders, here's the information, and let people know it's like, if you're not seeing what you need to be seeing, or if you're seeing too much, this is what we're going off of. Here's the model. And that is empowering for people and helps in those situations. Well, as far as owning it too, looking at the benefits of going and solving this. So we've talked about clarifying ownership and accountability of that. How does it, in your view, this clarification help avoid task overlaps and gaps in the project?
Well, I think when people know like what's expected of them, and this, I was going to actually say this and goes right with this whole next topic, is as you're defining who's going to do what, whether it's a person or a role, however you're managing that, whatever. I think a piece of this too is that a lot of times people will just take that and they'll say, okay, that's what it is. And there's no communication, there's no conversation, there's no discussion afterwards. And I think it's really, really important to note that if you're on a team and you're getting assigned things as a role or as a person or as a group, you need to identify, yes, that is on my list, or no, it's not. And here's why I think it shouldn't be. And you need to clearly communicate that with your team, because I think what it does do, it's different than just saying, go get this done and make it work. And then everybody trips over it. If you're saying, okay, let's define what are the actual things you need to do? What are the actual things the other person needs to do? It creates the opportunity for the conversation for them to say, no. I didn't think I was supposed to be responsible for that. Or, oh no, I've totally got that under control. You don't need to worry about it. I think that allows us to avoid people tripping over each other as much as they would if they didn't have that conversation.
I like the phrasing too of tripping over each other versus a future topic, folks, is just, we're calling it, and most people understand this acronym, CYA. It's not so much tripping over. It's just that you signed on for something, agreed to it, and now you're saying, like, I never agreed to that. It's like, well, let me show you the email thread.
It's right here.
Yeah, it's right there. It's documented. You agreed to this. Getting into that, and I don't mean to be combative. Well, not always do I mean to be combative, but yeah, to have that back. But again, we're going to cover that. But I think at the core of all of this, like most of these topics, it's about building a culture of trust. When people know that here's what I'm being asked to do. Yes, I've agreed to go and do this. And then this is what it looks like going forward.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. I just really want to I want to point this out. I want to highlight this. I always say life is a team sport. Okay. You can do things on your own. But if you want to do great things, if you want to do big things, if you want to do big deliverables, if you want to make things happen, you have to do it as a team. And to be a team, you have to be able to depend on your teammates. You have to know what you're doing, you have to know what they're doing, and you have to be able to work together. And I think it's critically important to build a culture of trust, because if you don't trust your teammates, and this is in the what not to do file, right? What not to do, the biggest project failure file of them all, is lack of a culture of trust, and you think that everybody around you is going to drop the ball, or that they're going to go behind your back and not do something. And if that's happening, the whole team is going to struggle, and the whole team is going to potentially be at risk to fail.
Yeah, this is one of those things where I think that so much of what we do is about that building that trust, losing that trust, being trusted. I mean, this is something that's one of my favorite things, that there are people who having, hired and fired, been in those roles through a lot of my career. I want to find people that I can trust, that if they don't know the answer, that they will go and take the steps to find the answer without coming back to me and just saying, couldn't find the answer. What's next? There's nothing wrong in some roles of having ticket taker type functions. And there's some things like in support where that's literally your job, is to take tickets and go and resolve those. But we all want to have, as managers, we want to have people that we can trust and have a culture where if it's assigned to you, that you have some degree of autonomy within that role to go in and do something about that, to do the job. That's why again, going back to that methodology, that model, like RACI, it's just a structured approach to mapping out those roles and that the accountability, so people know what they've signed up for. But it also is a great way to, whatever the methodology is, it's like Sharon and I always say, I don't care what methodology you use, just use one. But to align those things with what your business is trying to do. So if I have, having organized, project management offices, PMOs, run teams, run initiatives, cross company, intercompany, different business units, kind of all those different things, is making sure that, people are assigned to things and levels of ownership and accountability based on their division, their role. It's easier to then to show how the tasks roll up to the organizational goals and approach for these things. So it should be at the center of, large or small, have that definition. Again, you don't have to spend an entire hour going through and talking about each functional role. If you have them defined, have definitions around each of if you're using the RACI model, each of those definitions, what it actually means, those DLs, people can then adjust those. Too much information, not enough information, change the status there. Here's what I need. It's a conversation.
And if you want the absolute boiled down, like you're like, I don't have time. I don't have a full-time project manager, Christian. I can't keep up with all this stuff. RACI's great, but I don't have time to do it. If all you do is say, this is the roller person and this is the deliverable they're responsible for, if that's all you can get to, do it. Start there and build off of that.
And so much of the key around this too, and we talk about this often, is around communication. You can have it as simple as what Sharon just described there, and then send out to that. You don't have to even have a formal project kickoff where you walk through and talk about the methodology, but you send an email out to the stakeholders and the rest of the team. Hey, project XYZ just kicked off today. Here's the project owner. Here's the end deliverable. We've got 30 days to accomplish this. It's now part of our portfolio of the projects that are live. It's now live. And you have enough of the definition there, if it's going to touch on other groups, to give them a heads up and say, hey, that would even be an outline for the next email from that project owner of, reach out here. You're my 5 key stakeholders. Here's the piece. If I'm missing anybody here, this is what we're going to be driving towards. Here's your role. We need to meet, weekly until this concludes. And you go. So at each level, you can have that quick instruction. Here's your role. This is why you're on the CC, or those that are on the BCC line that are just being informed of things. You understand your role. If I'm not, that's why we have rules in email, Sharon. Or I know that I treat differently those that are if I'm in the 2 line, if I'm in the CC line or the BCC line.
Wait, does matter?
Yeah.
Like that stuff matters. There's like actually different things for a reason. Like who knew?
The thousands of unread emails in my inbox attest to the fact that that model works. I've not read the stuff that I don't need to read.
That's so great. I think I would also add another point to this, and you kind of touched on it lightly, but I really want to drive it home. When you're communicating, especially, remember we talked about life's a team sport, projects are team sports. Do it visibly. Communicate as visibly as possible. I would rather over communicate than under communicate. What that means is I would rather something that too many people see. And I know everybody's, well, what if it's sensitive? What if it's protected? What if it's NDA? Okay, guys, if it's protected, sensitive, NDA, think about who's going to see it and be thoughtful about it. But really, I would rather over communicate roles, responsibilities, tasks, expectations, then I would under communicate them. Because at the end of the day, I want more people to know and let people who are like, hey, thanks for letting me know, but I don't need to do anything about this, versus having like private chats where nobody knows what's going on, or a private email where nobody knows what's going on. And I get it. There are occasional things where we need to have sideline conversations about very specific topics. But if I was to push one thing, I would say, be as visible with your communication as you can possibly be, almost to the point of failure.
Transparency. Yes. No, I'm a huge advocate for the working out loud model. It's a project. We're in the company, or we have the NDAs are in place here. So again, we're Microsoft centric technology, so we use Teams. So have the channel conversations for the project, not the private chats on other things. And so that's an ongoing cultural thing. People need to be trained and understand like the differences between those. But again, whether you're using Slack or some other tool that's out there, it's if I send Sharon a private message where we're talking about the project details, and then suddenly we expand it to one more person. Yeah, the rest of the stakeholders are being left out. Have private conversations, have your DMs, have those things. That's fine. But the majority of the work that you should be doing should be in an open place where anyone who's a stakeholder that should have visibility can have that visibility.
Yeah,
have that open dialogue.
I challenge this all day, every day, everywhere I'm at, because people are like, well, somebody's going to see my decisions. Somebody's going to see me potentially not know what's going on. Somebody's going to see me ask question. And my response to that is great.
Yeah. Yeah. The only caveat I would give there is that people could be a bit more constructive sometimes with their feedback. This is, and we've seen this over the last couple of decades. Around social media, but it's just kind of a lot of the bad habits of social media where there's a lot of bravado, where people are very brave with their comments coming in. And I mean, there are people that you and I know, Sharon, that are from the community that sound really incredibly harsh in every interaction with them online, and they're wonderful in person. And I've even commented to two people in particular. I won't say names. They probably know who they are. But where I've said, like, your online persona, like, you need to soften your wording. You need to be more aware of that, because it doesn't reflect it's two different people, Jekyll and Hyde.
No, I think that's a really important point, because in what you're talking about is asynchronous communication, which could be its own topic, right? Asynchronous communication sometimes can come across with unintended, emotions and feelings in a way that face-to-face communication just does not. And so, when I say visible, my point really is, don't be afraid to ask questions in front of the group. Don't be afraid to give status updates in front of the group, because everybody needs to know what's going on. I'm not saying, tell everybody your life story and share all your burdens with the world. What I'm saying is, in the scope of a project, don't be afraid to be visible when needing something, running into a roadblock, asking a question, things like that. Take it to the group so that everybody can participate.
The dumbest question is the question never asked.
Correct.
Which is not entirely true, but mostly. Are there dumb questions? Well, yeah, but most of it we self-edit. You should ask the questions. I mean, because this is something that there's a fundamental. Somebody asked a fundamental question. It could be that they weren't listening, they weren't paying attention. But because we could be 10 people sitting in a call, especially in a hybrid, some in person, some online. You might not pick up every side conversation or comment going on. And so you might have missed that piece. So when somebody asks like a basic question, what are the things that in my head I think about, whether it's around a product launch or marketing related or project, as I said, did we not define it the right way? Did we not sufficiently describe that? And I'll actually go back and look at it. It's kind of like when a product is live and you're looking at, well, what kind of support tickets? Where are people struggling? What are they complaining about in our documentation? Where can we optimize? Where can we improve? It's the exact same thing. So when you're getting that, that's why I say there really is a dumb question. And it just say, okay, did we miss that? Or, hey, that's a great point. Let me double back, because I don't think we emphasized that or explained it fully. And I will go back and modify the description or the documentation or whatever.
Well, what your teacher always said, if one person has the question, probably more people have it and they're just not asking. So that's another thing too, right? If I see somebody ask a question, this says to me, there's probably more confusion, to your point, around this topic than we realize. So let's figure out a way to solve that.
So let's talk long-term benefits of clearly defined roles, and then some of our call to action and what people do with this. I know we're folks, we are trying to stick closer to the 30-minute mark. 30, 35 minutes to keep this shorter. We're aware of everybody's time here. And there's, of course, other content and a book that's being written and all this kind of stuff around there. But, please comment if you have other questions. If we cut short on a topic, you're like, if you think, hey, that would be a good standalone episode, please let us know. But long-term benefits of doing this, I mean, one is around if you have more transparency, if you have more accountability, it will have a direct impact on team morale. It will have an impact on how engaged people are. And you can look at and say, well, this stakeholder is not really involved. And I go and look at the model and be like, right, because they're just being informed. If we need more of their voice, then we need to change their status in this model and bring them in and let them agree. Do they need to assign somebody that's coming to the status meetings or show up themselves or what? Let's have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I say this every time I go into anything. I'm a big believer in the many hands light work method, which is the idea that everybody has something, they know what to do, but that they don't feel overwhelmed with it. And I feel like the more it's defined, the better you feel about what you're doing. Because if you show up to a meeting and you're not sure what you're supposed to do, and you feel like you don't know, so you didn't do anything, you tend to be more embarrassed whenever you show up to task reviews or status calls or whatever. And oftentimes people will begin to not participate because they're not sure what they're supposed to do. So they don't know if they did it or not. And then that creates that kind of feeling of, I didn't do it and I'm embarrassed and I'm behind, versus if you give them something, it's very clear, it's very defined, and it's very small. They do it. They know if they did it. And when they show up, they can be empowered to say, I did my thing. Yeah. Let me give you a demo. Let me answer your questions. And it builds confidence for people to show up.
And I don't think we do enough of that kind of thing, especially to like celebrate our wins. Like it was something we just move on to the next open task and don't recognize like, hey, this took like these people came in over the weekend to get
we need done. A topic on that. We definitely need a topic on that. And I'm going to be honest, because I try really hard to do it to some degree. But we don't do it as much as we really should. And we've talked about that as a leadership team. Like, how can we celebrate our wins in a better way? Because you're absolutely right. I mean, there's always more work to do, And I think you're absolutely right. As people know that they've accomplished something, this is why in Agile, the ceremonies around demos are so incredibly important. Yeah. It gives people the satisfaction to be like, look what I did. And everybody gets to be like, oh my God, that's awesome.
This makes me think too about the fact that I've used this structure, especially when you have like a new PM coming in or somebody that is, wants to move into this role from a more junior place. And I have them shadow a PM, for example, in this role. You can use this structure and this accountability to give people more to start doing career growth and development with individuals of what area ownership did I have on this. So you could actually internally use that as a talking point and say, look, I had this responsibility in these last 4 projects that went really well. And here's what I did. I'd like to do bigger projects of, whatever that is. But you can do this in a more structured way by giving them more when you're planning in this way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's super helpful. I think it makes people really understand kind of what's going on.
So I always like looking at this like from a competitive advantage standpoint. If you are more organized, if you are more on top of things, if you're more, accountability driven around this, like all these things make you more competitive, out in the marketplace. People want to be challenged. They want to be able to grow within their roles. If you can make it this visible, if you are this organized around how you run projects, people are really drawn to that. I like an analogy that from this weekend was thinking about was like a little boy flying a kite with his dad, and it's flying up there high in the wind, and the little boy says, well, can we cut the string? It'll fly even higher. And dad's like, no, having the constraints against the buffers of the wind, that will make it soar higher. If we cut it loose, so then it may go a little bit higher, but then it will eventually just crash to the ground. So you need to have the structure. You need to have those constraints, so that you can, again, that methodology, that structure, so that you can then excel in that thing that you want to actually do, which in Kite's case is stay afloat. But from a competitive advantage, so role ambiguity causes inefficiencies, frustration, poor project execution. Having clearly defined roles, it means we're more accountable, we're more efficient, we're more collaborative because we know who to go to when we have questions. And then having a practical framework like RACI model or any of the ones that are out there, it helps with the patterns, the behaviors, to change the defaults and the culture so that it's structured, it's transparent, and then that allows people to more clearly see, here's what I'm being asked to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So call to action, I'd say, look, if you're out there with your projects, go back and reflect on that now. It's never too late to go back in after the fact and say, here's the structure, here's the levels of ownership, here's the responsibility for each of those. You can go in and do that. You just need to be proactive. Make a cultural change and then communicate around each one of those things. But any other final thoughts, Sharon?
I mean, truthfully, at the end of the day, I think my only final thoughts are, like I said earlier, even if all you do is put names or roles with deliverables, start somewhere. Just start somewhere. Make a list, put it in OneNote, put it on a Word doc, put it in your calendar, like whatever makes sense, but have something. Because I think if you can start somewhere, then everybody, and also be open and transparent to that conversation and communicate. I think it will become clearer, and you'll find the value so fast that you'll be like, oh my gosh, why have we not been doing this?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a wrap. I want to thank everybody for watching the episode. If you've not following Sharon and I out on the various socials, we're out there. Sharon E. Weaver and Buckley Planet. You can find us all over the place. Again, all the back episodes are all out on YouTube. And so you can find them all out on, if you go YouTube, Buckley Planet, you'll find it. If you find Sharon's YouTube page, you'll find the episodes. It's all out there. You can also go to projectfailurefiles.com and sign up for the brand new newsletter. I think end of month will probably be our first one. It will be weekly. We'll send out a summary with, here was the last episode, here's the links to that, here's the summary information, and then here's next week's episode. And next week we're going to be talking about creating bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, because we all love that. So that should be a good topic.
Fun.
Always lots of stuff going on. Of course, that will be next Monday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. Every Monday morning for the rest of our lives, we will be doing this. Rain or shine, holiday or not, it'll be out there. If it's a holiday, it'll be recording, but it'll be a new recording of Sharon and I talking about something that you care about. So, but anyway, thanks everybody for coming. We'll see you next Monday.
Bye.